Good day, fellow champions of inclusion. I am Aaron, and this is the Inclusive Dad podcast, where we explore inclusion and make it practical. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me in exploring ways we can create a more inclusive world together. You are important, you matter, and you can make a difference. Today, my guest is Dr. Eric Endlich. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Aaron.
Yeah.
Great to be here.
Yeah.
It's a cause that I'm passionate about.
Yeah, why don't you just start us off just telling us, everybody, a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I kind of discovered my, calling in the second half of my life to help create a more inclusive world by working with students around the country, neurodivergent students, to successfully apply to and transition to college. And I have a variety of kind of aspects of my background that feed into this. I'm a clinical psychologist. I worked in mental health for a long time, worked with teens, worked with neurodivergent teens. My own kids are neurodivergent. So I've been in like the autism world for 25 plus years.
Sure.
And then about 15 years into that, my wife and I kind of figured out that I'm neurodivergent as well. So I co-wrote a book on autistic adults, really kind of doubled down helping neurodivergent folks, and founded Top College Consultants, which is a company helping neurodivergent students apply to college.
Sure. That's great. What is your definition of inclusion?
Great question. Inclusion is creating an environment that is welcoming and accessible to everyone, regardless of various kinds of differences they may have, whether it's age, economic status, race, gender, sex, or disability status. And I think there's a lot of great supports out there for neurodivergent students, but ideally we want to work towards a world that is more inclusive so that the burden isn't on students to pursue the accommodations and supports.
Yeah, I love that. I think I know the answer to this question, but is the college application process is it kind of set up in a way that is not helpful to neurodivergent students?
Well, it's challenging and stressful for everyone, so let's just put that out there right from the beginning. I'm actually giving a talk in a couple of days on managing anxiety through the college admissions process. So that's that's kind of the foundation. But yeah, there's a number of aspects of it that are especially challenging for neurodivergent students. One being the whole aspect of writing, which can be challenging for some of our students. I have some students who are phenomenal writers. They just sail through that part of the work. But other students, they may have other strengths. Maybe it's math or STEM subjects, and they really struggle with writing and self-reflection. The kinds of essays that they have to write for college applications are very different from what they're used to in school. So even if they are doing fine in school, that is a stumbling block for a lot of students. And then there's other pieces of it too, like how do I know which colleges are going to be more inclusive or supportive? And
Sure.
That's one of the things we really focus on.
So how do you find colleges that are maybe more inclusive, or is there like a list out there somewhere? Something?
Well, I created a list.
Okay.
When I started out, I was kind of looking around for those colleges, and there were a couple of lists in existence, but not all the links were up to date. They didn't have key information for families, like how much do the programs cost, because some of these programs cost thousands of dollars above and beyond tuition. So I wanted to create a list that would be really useful for families. Also, it's a database, so it's not just a list that you scroll through. You can sort it, for example, by state. If you're wondering, hey, I just want the colleges in Texas or Kansas or Massachusetts that are going to have support programs. But I've traveled to colleges, network with colleagues, a lot of different processes involved in building a list.
Is there a certain state that's like maybe at the top of the list as being the most inclusive, or is there anything that just stands out?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a particular state. It's interesting. There are a number of really small private colleges that have robust support programs. There's only 2 in the country that are exclusively for students with learning differences. But there's a number of other small private colleges that have pretty solid supports. And then there's some big public flagship universities, state colleges, so to speak, that have really well-developed programs too. And a number of, in the middle or in other categories like STEM schools or liberal arts schools. I would say I'm on the West Coast. The West Coast is not the strongest, unfortunately, for support programs. There's a lot in the Northeast. There's a lot sort of scattered around the Midwest and in the Southeast and Mid-Atlantic. I'd say Mid-Atlantic and Northeast are really good hotspots, but of course, that's also where a lot of colleges are.
Right. Yeah, that's great. I've not gone to college for a long time. So, I mean, what is like the typical, let's say I'm graduating or my child's going to be graduating. What is like the typical application process these days for going to college?
Yeah, so a lot of things have changed since we went to college, and it's changing every year. Those of us who are educational consultants are staying on top of the news, communicating with each other. I read education news every day because there's so much changing, like standardized testing, for example. It still exists. You can take the SAT or the ACT as well as other tests like the AP exams, but they are now thousands of schools are now test optional, meaning that students have the option to take a test or not take it, or to take it and not report their scores, or to report their scores to some colleges and not others. So that's created a lot more decisions for students, as opposed to you take the test, you report the score, and that's that. The other thing is with the advent of the Common App and the explosion of colleges who are on the Common App, students are applying to a lot more colleges than they used to. I literally applied to one college. I was like, I'll just decide before I apply where I want to go. And then, instead of having to fill out a bunch of applications. But nowadays, students apply to 10 or more colleges quite regularly. And there's multiple rounds of deadlines. So you've got early action, early decision, regular decision, rolling admissions. So that all of these different complexities make it confusing and overwhelming sometimes for families to navigate.
So you say like a common application, meaning like I can fill out one application and then just send it to just multiple different institutions?
Correct. Yeah, it's an organization called the Common App, and it's a platform that students go on to apply to a bunch of colleges at this, through the same platform. There are some colleges or universities that have separate platforms. For example, the University of California is an entirely separate platform. It's not through the Common App. There are universities in other countries that are not on the Common App, but there are quite a few. The most common colleges that students are applying to in many cases are on the Common App. That being said, saying that it's one application is a little simplified because each college may have separate questions or separate essays. They may say, why do you want to apply to this particular college? And you have an additional essay for that college. But it does make the process simpler versus logging onto a whole bunch of websites and figuring out how that site works.
Yeah, interesting. When you talk about essays, I came across something on Facebook where a parent I know had asked, I think this is in high school, but apparently the high school uses AI to check to see if the student actually wrote the essay or the document that they're submitting, and they were thinking there was some bias towards like English language learners or against them, I guess, and like neurodivergent students. Is that something you've come across where colleges are teasing that? And it appears like there's some biases in them.
We could spend the whole time talking about AI. That's another fast moving, fast changing aspect that impacts college and college admissions. Initially the big concern is like, students are going to use AI to write their essays. And it's gotten much more complex than that with, as you said, sometimes colleges trying to use algorithms to figure out if students have used AI.
Yep.
That's a very tricky, complex topic because there is no absolute surefire way to know if something's created by AI. And I'm not going to go into the details of why that's the case. Again, that's a whole separate topic. That being the case, colleges are still using those programs to try to detect, and sometimes there's false positives and students get incorrectly accused of using AI when they haven't. The bottom line is that if that's how they're writing their essays, they're typically not going to be as good. So they probably won't get into college, not because they cheated, but because their essay just doesn't have the ring of truth. It's an opportunity to dig deep and share something about yourself, and you can't go online and get that. You have to go within to get that.
Yeah, sure. Interesting. So what is your business? How do you help neurodivergent teens and their families help them get into college or apply to colleges?
Yeah, well, I manage a team of folks around the country, and our students, our work is virtual, especially since the pandemic.
Yep.
So our students are all over the country. We even work with some students in other countries. And I love getting students in early, ninth grade, even sometimes earlier, ninth or 10th grade typically, so we can kind of build a relationship. I'm a former therapist. I really want to connect with kids. It's not just a transactional process. It's developing a team. They're going to be working with adult professionals in college, so it's a great opportunity for them to have that kind of mentoring relationship. And if we start early on in high school, we can help with college readiness. If there's things that they are not ready to do if they are going to move away from home and live independent of their parents or guardians in college, then there's lots of time to work on those skills in high school. Like, can you get yourself up in the morning? Can you keep track of your assignments? Can you self-advocate with your instructors? All these things that parents won't be around to do in college. Then there's, choosing courses. So if a student says, I want to be a musician, I want to study music in college, I want to study computer science, I want to study English, whatever it is, we can kind of chart a path to do that, and also figure out, okay, so what should you be doing in the summer to build your college readiness, to kind of carve that path to that career that you're thinking about. Of course, some students have no idea what they want to do or study, and that's fine too. And we can help with that too, to explore different things. And then we help, of course, with the actual, completing the application, brainstorming about the essays, not writing the essays for them, but giving them feedback, helping them, teaching them to become better writers, and thinking about gap year decisions. Do they take time off before college? So a lot of different pieces, preparing for interviews.
Yeah. So my daughter Cecilia, she's 22, and so she aged out of the, that system last fall. And in preparation, she had wanted to go to the local community college in town and had applied, gotten a letter. She was accepted. So she had her little party when she turned 22, aged out. Then went to the local community college to try to get her registered for classes starting in January, and then found out she needed to take the AccuPlacer, and we're like, okay, what? You didn't say anything about this ahead of time. So, I like what you said about trying to help people earlier on and trying to work through the process. For at least for us, we probably should have started earlier, and we relied on the school and the college to tell us what needed to be done, and I'm not sure what happened exactly, but she took the AccuPlacer, which she can have some supports. I think there was somebody with her, and I don't remember exactly what they did, but it wasn't to the level of the support she received in school. So then she did not get a score that was high enough to be able to take classes. So now she's in the So she was, excited to go to college, and then now she can't go to college. So in our situation, it was kind of frustrating. Like, why didn't you tell us this before? Because then maybe we could have prepped, or at least known what was going to happen to have, hey, this is, have those conversations. So for us, it was kind of frustrating. So I can See, we're starting earlier and preparing, like, hey, this is the process. These are the kind of things you need to look out for. Would have been beneficial for us at least.
Yeah, lots of families talk about the services cliff, that when you age out of, when you're no longer covered by the school district, that suddenly you're kind of set adrift. You're so used to getting all these services either through the school district or paid for by the school district. I went through that as a parent as well. A few main areas that families don't often learn about before they age out. One is for students who have intellectual disabilities, who may want some kind of college experience. It sounds cool to them. They want to live on campus. They want, whether it's the sports, the social life, the learning, but they're not intellectually capable of passing college courses. There are still inclusive programs on college campuses around the country for those students. That's not the population we typically work with, but I'm familiar with those programs. One of my kids went to one of those for a little while. And there's an organization called Think College that does have a list of the programs on their website. That's one thing. Second thing is financially. College can be super expensive, and some of these support programs, which can really help students make the difference between being successful in college or not, those programs can be super expensive too. Many students with disabilities qualify for public benefits. They are in many cases not related to the family's income. So if you're thinking, oh, well, we probably make too much money for that, it's not a factor for many of these benefits. And especially once kids turn 18, they're adults and their own finances are looked at. But so in some cases, whether it's vocational rehab or another state agency or federal agency, there may be sources of funding for college and for support programs. And then the third thing I want to say about the transition is that things are radically different. You kind of highlighted one change, but the biggest change is that the laws that apply to students with disabilities are different in high school versus college. So in high school, or in K through 12, the burden, the legal obligation is on the school district to identify a disability and to help students be successful by providing accommodations, supports, and services. Once they, as you said, age out and they're now in college or going to college, they're covered by different laws. And in college, the laws require the college to help make college accessible for students, but not to do anything to ensure students succeed. So it's entirely up to the student to declare if they have a disability. That's their choice. To seek out accommodations, to talk with their instructors about the accommodations. Suddenly the student is in the driver's seat. As a special needs parent, I was used to being on the front lines advocating for my child. I'm sure many folks can relate to that. But then there's this kind of switch where you need to trade places, and your student, your child needs to step up and self-advocate.
Yeah, that's all. It's very true. It's just it's a switch. And as a parent, you're like, my daughter, she requires somebody with her like 24/7. So there's a lot of other stuff that you have to think about. So you kind of keep pushing that out there. We'll get to it. Well, then it happens, and it's like, okay, we should have been doing this we should have been things we were working on, 5 years ago or a couple of years ago, and it just kind of hits you all at once. So you need to start thinking about it before you think you need to. That's for sure.
Right, which is why we love starting to work with students early, so we can figure out, do they need a gap year? Is college the right choice for them? What other options are out there, et cetera? Yeah.
In Minnesota, there is at least one program we're in southern Minnesota, up in the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul area. I did check it out, and I believe you need to be more independent than my daughter is, so she was not able to go. So for somebody like her, where she needs help with daily living tasks, there doesn't seem to be a lot, at least in Minnesota, programs like that where she can go and go to college. So that's something. Made a little more difficult for her too.
Sorry to hear that. Sometimes students go to different states, go out of state for support programs or for college. But if they're looking for funding from state agencies, that may or may not work out of state.
Right.
Sometimes an agency will say, we will pay for programs in state, but not out of state. And then
Right.
you're kind of stuck with whatever is located in your state.
Yeah, for sure. What are some things? So you kind of went around. You said you have a kind of a list of different, more inclusive schools. I mean, let's say I'm a parent and I'm, besides looking at the list, what are some things I can do as a parent to, like, when I'm looking for at a college, to kind of maybe see if they are inclusive, or maybe there's some little tricks to try to look into that as a parent?
Yeah, well, I created a blog post, what questions should I ask the disabilities office,
Yeah.
which would include those kinds of things. What should you be inquiring about? So, there's like 25 questions on the list.
Sure.
I do encourage families to, when they are touring colleges, which is often when the student's a junior, 11th grader, to not just do the standard tour, but set up a separate meeting with disability services at the college or the support program if they have one. Sometimes if there's a support program, it's run out of disability services. Sometimes it's completely separate and you need to do both. And most of the time, disability services staff will meet with prospective students. Occasionally they say, no, you have to be a registered student first. But that gives you opportunity to see not just what is the college like, but if we're going to be working with this disability services office, what are they like? What do they have to offer? How many students use them? Where's the office located? What's the training of the staff? What's the range of services? So you really kind of feel that out and see, is this a place I could see myself being for 4 or more years? Rather than just kind of, registering once you become a student and finding out, oh, geez, I thought it was going to be different from this.
Right. True.
That being said, our students have all the same factors to think about when they're applying to college as neurotypical students. Does it have, is it located somewhere I want to be? Is it the right size? Is it affordable for my family? Does it have the things I want to study or the clubs I want to join? So you're looking at all the same factors that other students are, plus supports. Now, there's various different ways to get support, and there's different levels of support. All colleges have disability accommodations. For all practical purposes, every college will offer the accommodations, whether they have services above and beyond or a full-fledged support program. That's a distinction. That's, again, why I created the database of those programs. Now, you may want to go to a college that doesn't have that kind of support because it's the closest to home, or it's the most affordable, or you love that particular major they have that's really unusual. So you can still get support from outside the college. You can hire outside professionals or companies that are designed to support students while they're in college. So you're not restricted to the colleges on the list. But if you can get, one-stop shopping, that's great.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And like for my daughter too, it was more like she wanted to go to college, and as a parent, like if she wants to do it, let's try to make it possible. And I don't probably ever see her, getting a 4-year degree or a doctorate or something like that. So it's more socializing. Just she likes learning, being in that setting. Are there ways for people with disabilities to have that experience without, let's say, going to the college and having to take on the loan part of it? Because that's also, like, if she has to go and then she needs loans to pay for it, I mean, how is she going to pay those off if she's on like government assistance? Is there
I want to see families avoid taking out loans as much as possible. For that reason, with students going to traditional degree seeking programs, we are really thoughtful in building list. So the most important factor in whether the college is going to be affordable, scholarships, all that, is where you apply, because they vary tremendously in terms of how much support they can get, how much support they give. Again, for students who are not seeking a traditional degree, there are those alternative programs that Think College has a great list of. And in many cases, those are being paid for by Voc Rehab or another state agency. So families are not taking out loans. I understand in your case, it's not going to work because of the options in your state. but that's what families sometimes do.
Yeah.
Or perhaps the state agency is is paying for the support program. So there are support programs where a student lives at the program, not at the college. They live at the program. They get wraparound 24/7 support from the staff who live there at the program too, and they attend a nearby college that might be right across the street.
Okay.
And I visited these programs coast to coast. And again, sometimes those programs are paid for by state agencies. If they're not, they're as expensive as college, unfortunately.
Right.
So that's now if it's mostly about the academics and not the social piece, I just want to have a career. I don't care about the football games, etc.
Yeah.
Well, in this day and age, there's so many online opportunities for education. Right. Whether it's a certificate, maybe you don't need a degree. Maybe you just want a certificate to learn how to do medical billing or program a certain computer language. So you can get certificates online. Many of those are very affordable,
right,
rather than a full degree. Or you can get a full degree online too. And maybe you build your social life in some other way by,
right,
a day program or clubs or other kinds of outlets.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the online thing is very great and accessible. It's just for my daughter, she's taking some like refresher classes online for like adult education to like retake the acuplacer. So she enjoys, doing the work. It's just then she's at home, with with mom or the social pieces in there. So it's like that's why I kind of want to get her to be able to do something on at the small campus.
Yeah.
So she sees people and has interaction. So.
And when young adults are clients of state agencies, I encourage the families to sort of push back on the agencies and say,
right,
hey, help us find stuff.
Right.
Like, sure, you can go online and search for programs for disabled young adults in your area, and there's all kinds of great programs around, but you could also ask the agency to help with that.
True. That's a good point. How do you think we can use empathy to be more inclusive?
Wow, great question. And just as an aside, I will say it is a persistent stereotype that autistic people can't empathize, which is unfortunate because it's simply not true. In many cases, autistic people have empathy that's so strong that the feelings can be overwhelming, but we might express it differently,
sure,
even though, so it may show up differently. But as far as kind of how people in general can be empathetic, I think, be curious, ask questions. Don't assume you know how someone thinks, feels, operates, or what language they want to use. For example, most autistic people prefer identity first language. Autistic person, not person first language, person with autism.
Yep.
Many neurotypical people assume the reversed. So just like you can't know somebody's pronouns without asking them, you don't know what kind of language someone wants to use unless you ask them. And educate yourself, be curious, learn. And the experts, I believe, are the people with lived experience, not just the people who say, I'm an expert on this kind of diagnosis or disability, but
for sure,
I've lived with this and I can tell you what it's like from the inside.
Yeah, that's great. What is one tip you can share to help the listeners be more inclusive today? So just something anybody can do today to start doing today to be more inclusive.
I would go back to what I said, be curious, ask questions, try, as it was in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, seek first to understand.
Okay.
So it's so tempting, especially as a parent, or if you're older than the person you're speaking to want to give advice. Oh, have you tried this? You should do this.
Yeah.
And kind of bite your tongue and hold back on that temptation and say, so how have you dealt with that? What have you thought about doing about that? And empower the person. You seem like a smart person. You seem capable. I wonder how you're going to manage that.
Yeah.
So not assuming that you have to rush in and solve it for someone else.
Yeah, that's a great tip. I tend to like when I'm listening to somebody talk, my brain's trying, if they have a problem, like trying to figure out solutions for them. So I need to often just try to, hey, focus, listen, ask questions for clarification. Don't try to solve problems if they don't ask for help.
Right. Yeah. And don't assume just because someone's sharing a problem
Yeah.
that they're asking for your advice. Or they just may be wanting empathy. They may just want a listening ear. I, again, worked many years as a therapist. And I found when people came into therapy, they knew what they wanted. In many cases, some people would say, I have panic attacks. Help me figure out what to do about that. I want advice. I don't know. This thing just started and I have no idea what to do about it. So sometimes people are, in fact, looking for advice. But in many other cases, people would come in and say, I just want somebody to listen and understand.
Right. For sure. Where's the best place for everybody to connect with you?
topcollegeconsultants.com, or you can email me at Eric, ERIC, at topcollegeconsultants.com. I'm on social media too.
Okay.
Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube.
A couple. I'll make sure I put links in the show notes and stuff for all that stuff. So, ready for the last question?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Do you like Spam lunch meat? Yes or no?
No, I'm vegan.
Yeah, I live by Austin, Minnesota, where they make Spam and where the Spam Museum is located. So I've been asking all my guests just to see what the answers are. It's usually a pretty fast yes or no. So it's kind of middle ground usually.
Well, we had the pleasure of going to Hawaii last year, where they make Spam sushi.
Yep. So. Yeah, Spam is big in Hawaii, I've heard. So
apparently so.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you, Aaron. Nice talking to you.
To those listening, thank you for allowing me to be part of your journey. It is truly an honor. Please join the podcast newsletter by clicking on the link in the episode description to keep up with the latest episodes. Together, we can make the world more inclusive. Until next time, stay empowered and be a champion for inclusion.